Hi there, Phil again, filming on a beautiful morning in early summer. This topic is about the location of protected structures such as glass houses, tunnel houses and shade houses. Permanent structures, not actually things like cloches which you can easily move from one place to another. Whereas the permanent structures, you need to think a fair bit about the placement of them, because when you've got them there, it's very difficult to move them. You can see here that I've got three different protected structures. I've got a tunnel house, which was the first one I made 14 years ago. Originally I made it for tomatoes, and I was fairly careful about the location for it, as you'll see when I discuss the different aspects. However, I've since moved the tomatoes out of there and I've actually got orchids growing in there because I've developed an interest in them. Then I have the more recent tomato structure, which is this tunnel house here. This one here was a kit set structure which I purchased, so it was of a set size. In this case here, I constructed this tunnel house onto my existing raised gardens, and as a result I had to customize the size. This has got insect proof netting on it, which I've constructed for the purpose of protecting the tomatoes from insects, which we can have a problem with here, and it's been very successful. Again, I was careful about the placement, both practically thinking about the best growth conditions for the tomatoes themselves and also capsicums and chilies, but also about aesthetics, as we'll see as we go along. Then my third house is this shade house that I have here, which is a simple lean-to construction with shade-proof sides and a simple roof on it, and this is also for orchids, for cooler growing ones, as we'll see as I discuss them. I'll be talking about the different aspects which are important when you consider the location of your greenhouse and how I've resolved them in my constructions. First of all, sunshine. Greenhouses should receive optimum light to be fully effective, depending on what is to be grown in them. Warm season vegetables such as tomatoes and peppers demand full sunshine. Green crops such as brassicas and lettuces can be grown in the greenhouse in the cool season. These also require good light. Flowering pot plants including orchids and begonias usually need strong light but not full sunlight. These benefit from strong light early or late in the day, but can benefit from shade from a neighbouring structure or vegetation during the full heat of summer days. As I mentioned before, this shade house that I have here is for some of my orchids. These are cool growing South American varieties, so therefore they actually suit low light, cool conditions, which is where they evolved in the Andes in South America. Secondly, wind. Strong wind can damage greenhouse structures, particularly plastic covered ones. It also has a chilling effect which transmits into the house. However, some degree of exposure to breezes can help with ventilation if you're relying on vents rather than an extraction fan. When you plan your greenhouse, locate the door away from the direction of the prevailing wind, as strong winds can tip plants over and be damaging to crops. Thirdly, the soil. Now, the soil under the greenhouse may be immaterial if you're planning to grow plants on benches. If you're growing crops in the ground, fertile and free draining soil will be even more important than when growing in open ground. This is partly because there is usually no guttering on greenhouses. Rainfall runs down the sides and then seeps into the soil in the greenhouse. You can remedy defects in the soil by using raised gardens in the greenhouse. Next, services. It is very useful to have a water outlet close to the entrance of the greenhouse. You will also need convenient access to electricity or gas if you wish to install a powered system for heating or ventilation. Next, convenience. A greenhouse is a valuable and high maintenance part of your garden. Therefore, it should be located where it can be conveniently accessed from your house, perhaps from a handily located path. My greenhouses are out of sight of my main outdoor living areas, that is my terrace and my courtyard. However, they are still easily reached along convenient paths. Then aesthetics. A glasshouse is usually an attractive addition to a garden and can be included in the ornamental aspects of the overall landscape design. It can also contribute in a practical way. For instance, it can form part of the outer wall, as we call them, of a garden room. Plastic houses are usually less attractive and may be better relegated to a spot away from key vistas. In my situation here, my greenhouses are actually in my utility area, which includes the clothesline and compost bins. However, I do have a small terrace which actually overlooks this. We mainly use this in winter because it actually gets maximum sun. And even though it is not a highly ornamental area, it is still attractive with the vegetable gardens and with the protective walls of the greenhouses around it. Next, physical risks. Falling branches are the biggest risks apart from weather-related events. The greenhouse should be kept away from large trees, or else trees can be kept professionally pruned to reduce the risk of falling limbs. Finally, maintenance. You need to be able to access all parts of the greenhouse from the outside, either to replace broken panes with a glasshouse or to replace the cover of a plastic-clad house. Therefore, it should be sited with a clear area of at least 60 centimetres or 2 feet on all sides, including away from the property boundary. In my case, I have a no man's land between my boundary and my tunnel house, where I ensure that the flowering plants don't impede movement or overshade the house. So I hope you found this tip useful. I do find my greenhouses add great value to my gardening experiences. For example, my tomato house, which is actually designed to keep out any insects, also does provide a certain degree of shelter from the wind. I was talking to a friend recently who had trouble with his tomatoes being blown around in the spring winds. However, in my case, I had no trouble whatsoever because the insect-proof netting was actually providing a degree of shelter. Now, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so, and also like this video. And I'm also interested in any comments that you may have, because I do find them very interesting. I always check on them and reply to them, and quite often I learn different things from them. Finally, as always, of course, thank you very much for watching this through to the end.